Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another narration of one of my short stories. Today we have a narrator called Am on Duck, and I'm pretty impressed with what he can do. So I hope you enjoy him as much as I do. Without further ado, here he is.
Hello, welcome, and thank you for coming to listen to this story. I will be your narrator, Amon Duck. Huddle under your blankets, get comfortable, and let's get right into it. Where do I start? I am what you would call a hunter of sorts. For people who know about cryptids and believe they are real, well, they are, and stop looking for them and ending up dead. It makes my job 3 times harder when people go looking for trouble. As you can guess, I hunt things that shouldn't be seen by anyone. Yet here I am, on the daily, hunting and killing or relocating them. We don't always kill the creature that killed you and your entire family. Instead, given some situations, we can be given the task to move the creature to a more untraveled place of the world. Most of the time, that thing we hunt is too smart or powerful to live and must be killed. At least, this is what we are told. In recent days, I have found that we are looking at everything the wrong way. Instead, we are the monsters killing entire intelligent species because we see them as scary, or worse, capture them and try to integrate their abilities into our bodies. Well, I can gladly say my views have changed and I see they are just like us here, trying to survive. Now, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start this story on the day I did my last job. Just like any other call, 2 bodies appeared in the bad neighborhood and appeared to have odd markings on them. Upon arrival to the crime scene, I flashed my hunting license and was let through the yellow tape. I looked around to see the bodies of a female and male roughly the same age. The male was face down in the dirt with his legs aiming toward a manhole that was missing a lid. I glanced towards the woman and asked, "Any ID on the bodies?" to any cops that were listening to me. A cop in a few seconds then said, "The female didn't have any ID on her, but we found the male's wallet and car keys a few feet away from him. His name is John Paul, age 23. I pulled a small flashlight out of my pants pocket and walked to the manhole and began to shine into it to see if any claw marks or visible signs were pointing to the unnatural variety. Unfortunately, not a single sign of anything. I looked at the man and rolled him over with my foot and saw he had his head dented in, like something tried to bash his head in. I crouched down near the head and whispered to the guy, "What happened to you?" The corpse reanimated and yelled, "Go away!" I fell back a bit, scared as it was unexpected for a dead body to yell at you. I looked around and saw the other cops giving confused looks, meaning I was the only one to see and hear the body. This gave evidence that witchcraft could be involved. Before I could think of any more conclusions, the female gasped for air, and she screamed and kicked at the cops, yelling, "Monster!" I quickly ran to give her aid, but was cut off by an old co-worker stepping in my way and almost getting run over by me. She held a hand in the air towards my face and said, "Easy boy, now we don't need to bombard the poor girl with questions." In the meantime, I found the victim's car. With a snarky comment I replied, "There must be a mistake. I didn't request a bitch to follow me around." I should probably give some insight on who this coworker is exactly. An ex-girlfriend. I doubt I need to say more. After a heavily heated argument, Rebecca decided to cheat on me. So I did the most reasonable thing. I burnt down our house after taking all my stuff out of it. Of course, the crime was not reported, and as hunters got a good talking to about workplace relationships and how they're banned from happening. Most eyes were rolling, of course, but that's the point. She was at my job telling me what to do. Before I could tell her to properly fuck off, she began to look at the crime scene. I then said, "Why are you here anyway?" Rebecca nodded but was not listening and said, "Anyways, I need to show you this one thing you missed." I rolled my eyes and gave a hand gesture to lead the way. "Are you hungry or something and can't afford food?" "Are you hungry or something and can't afford food?" She hissed at my comment before saying, "No, the victim's car was here," with raised eyebrows, "and here?" "Did it disappear or something?" She shrugged and said, "Let's see if the restaurant has footage of the events." Entering the restaurant, it was nearly empty. The person behind the counter looked bored out of his mind as he daydreamed till he noticed us. He stood up straight and said, "Come to..." Rebecca cut him off and said, "We need to see your camera footage for the investigation next door." The boy nods and went to the back and began to talk with someone, presumably the manager. A rough-looking, overweight guy came around the corner with the teen and waved us to the back. We followed him to the small office as he already had the camera feed open and was halfway through the video. He then said, "You won't ever believe this shit. I'm thinking aliens or zombies." Rebecca forced him out of the room as I sat down in a worn-out rolly chair and looked at the screen, rewinding it a bit before pressing play and seeing an older 1992 or 1993 Corolla. I fast-forwarded the video slightly till a black SUV very slowly pulled up to the red Corolla. When the SUV passed them, the driver got out of the red Corolla and seemed to be our female victim. After a matter of seconds, someone stepped out of the SUV and came to the passenger side door and towards the female victim. Except for the door on the passenger side opened, and the attackers were brought to them as the other person inside the Corolla slammed the door on the attackers, then opened again as the attackers were kicked away from the car. As the attacker hit the ground, they broke into two parts. More began to leave the SUV as the female began running away. The male got up and went the same way. The two went out of camera view. The rest of the attackers chased till they began to run back to the SUV as a large shadow creature gave chase. They were forced into the SUV and sped off. The shadow creature watched before returning to the camera. I would say it was possibly 10 feet tall, with 6 red eyes and a large mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. For the other unknown attackers, well, they were all black and it was near impossible to tell what they were, but they were not human at the least. This is when Rebecca said, "Shit." I turned towards her with a confused look. Before I could say anything, she said, "There are weird things we hunt now. I believe we should go after the group of attackers as they seem to be organized and part of some bigger thing." I shook my head and said, "Or we split up and you go after the attackers and I'll find what shadow beast lives in the sewers." My phone goes off and I cuss beneath my breath as I looked at it and it read, "I need a ride home. They claim I'm sick." I sighed and got up before saying, "Well, I got to go and get my daughter from school. Got someone else to cover for me on the job." Rebecca then said, "You have a daughter? Is she mine?" I looked at her confused as hell and put my hand up and said, "I don't have time for your bullshit." And with that, I left the office, bumping into the teenager, which I had completely forgotten about. He grabbed my shoulders and said, "Is it aliens or zombies?" And then said, "Sir, remove your hands." He quickly let me go and said, "Sorry." I then said, "There was nothing on the video except for a gang of thugs attacking a couple." I saw the look on his face and knew it too. Some of us wish for the supernatural to be true, something to bring light to our dull, dark lives. Some wish to sleep with a mermaid or maybe a goat girl. Maybe they wish to talk to the dead or get special powers from demons. Well, I'm here to tell you that's all a bad idea. The supernatural is like a human. You push and push at them to get something from them, and they will knock your ass out. In this case, kill you. The look he had was of being disappointed that his horrible plain life is just that plain. I pushed him to the side as I went past him and out the restaurant. I saw the cops were cleaning up the crime scene, seeing they were finding all the evidence to find the attackers. Little did they know there was never a human killer part of this crime. I went back to my car. It was pretty hot from the blazing sun, so I left the door open and started rolling down all the windows before closing the door. Before I could drive off, I saw Rebecca walking away from the crime scene, even though she should be investigating more. Of course, I didn't want to question her. Or, I get the same bullshit remarks as usual, except this time she appeared to be more out there and asking me questions about my life that she should have known. I rubbed my face and thought it was some trick to have me follow her around and give her my attention. So I decided to drive off to my daughter's school. Upon arriving, my daughter Claire was on her cell phone with her earbud listening to music. I honked my horn and she gave me a look that said, "Fuck off." Then got off the cheap wooden bench she was sitting on, taking off her mask as she entered. She put her phone away from her earbuds and began the story she had loaded for me. So apparently I had to get tested for COVID-19 because I choked on water and had a tremendous coughing fit. I chuckled and said, "You're not supposed to breathe the water." She mocked my laugh and said, "Yeah, I know. So how was work?" I shook my head and said, "My bitch ex was there." Right away I could tell she was now interested as she said, "Oh, did she apologize for being a total bitch to both of us?" I shook my head no and said, "She was a bit off today. She even asked if you were her daughter." Claire leaned in her seat and paused for a moment before saying, "I guess she's doing hardcore drugs, huh?" I wondered the same thing. It was extremely unlikely this was the case. I began driving home as Claire began to play her music from the radio in the car. She would sing dramatically and try to lift my spirits. I laughed and would sing along on the songs with her, messing up on the words which appeared to bring a smile to her face. I enjoyed moments like this. It was simple and pure happiness. Unfortunately, it was short-lived as we arrived home. She got out with me and we entered our home, but I stopped her and had a horrible feeling. I gave her the keys and pointed at my car. Right away she went to the car as I drew my pistol and entered the house, closing the door behind me. I slowly crept through the house, looking for where this bad feeling was coming from. Yet, I couldn't find it. Eventually, I cleared the house and took a sigh of some relief. I began to go back outside to signal my daughter when I noticed a screw on the ground near the door. I bent down and then picked it up to look around for where it belonged, and sure enough, it was to my doorknob to my kitchen door. So I grabbed 2 trash bags and got B and Claire some pairs of clothes and a few other things before going to the car and locking the door behind me. I acted normal as I said, "False alarm," but I went ahead and got the stuff we are going to donate today at the shelter. I put the stuff in the back seat of my car and got in the driver's seat before holding 3 fingers together, giving her the signal to act normal. She bulked up with me as I calmly pulled out of the driveway into the street before leaving. Once 20 minutes away from home, I double-checked we weren't being followed. With all signs pointing to being clear, I pulled off under a bridge near where hobos lived and shady drug deals went down. Given our situation, this place would appear extremely dangerous, but I can safely tell you this would be one of the safest places to be at the moment. I took a deep breath before pulling my phone out and held a finger to my mouth to tell my daughter to be quiet. I then called the head of my organization, and after a few long rings they picked up and said, "May I help you, 6385? I calmly said, "My home has been breached. I believe it to be related to the current case me and Rebecca are working on." A long, unsettling pause followed till the male spoke again. 6385, 2614 is dead. Her body was found yesterday when she was investigating a case. We lost radio contact and sent out a recovery team which found her body. My heart froze in my chest. Rebecca was just with me that morning looking at the restaurant footage. This is when things began to click. The questions she asked were because whoever was trying to be her had no clue about what she knew, except for possibly what they could read. I glanced at Claire and saw she could tell I was nervous as well. I tried to act confident and said, "Sir, I saw her this morning on the case I've started today." The man on the other side of the line said, "Acknowledged. Await further instructions." That's when the phone hung up. I slammed my hands on the steering wheel in frustration, which made Claire jump in her seat. A few minutes passed before she said, "What are we going to do, Dad?" I looked at her and said, "We are going to go to a safe house I bought long ago, before you, to keep me and your mother." She grabbed my hand and said, "It's okay, Dad. Let's go." My wife, the mother of my amazing, wonderful child, was taken away from me when my baby girl was only 5. It was late at night and my phone died and I was bleeding out as I limped back home. Little did I know I was being followed. I led those things back home to my wife and child. It was my fault she is dead. I wish I died that night, and maybe, just maybe, she would still be alive and Claire would have had a normal life. I damned them both, making Claire motherless and forced into a life of moving constantly and the knowledge that the monster under your bed could bring you a world of pain and agony. This is what I thought while driving away from another home for what could be the rest of her life. In the late hours of the night, we arrived. I looked at Claire. She had used one of the trash bags as a pillow with her seat leaned back. She looked so peaceful there, asleep, dreaming of a time when life was great. I sighed and leaned into my seat and looked at the cabin where we would be staying at. It was run down and in ruins from the years of being left alone. It was made to last through nearly anything, but it still didn't look like it did long ago. Claire took a deep breath as she stretched and looked around and said, "Are we here?" I nodded and said, "Yeah, it's not as great as I remember it." She raised her seat to look out the windshield to see the car lights illuminating her old cabin in the middle of the woods. With a cheerful smile, she opened the door and rushed to the cabin. I opened the door and got out of the car when I heard Lauren say, "It honestly looks amazing." I looked around the cabin, standing in the sunlight, as me and my wife got out of the car. She rubbed her belly and said, Look, Claire, we will always have a home for you when we're gone and you're in trouble." I heard my distant voice say, "Yeah, let's hope that never happens, but it is done well. I made sure you will be safe." Lauren chuckled. I was then brought back to the darkness around me as I stared at the open passenger door where Lauren just was, reaching out at the air as if I could touch her one more time. I then heard Claire yell, "Dad, come help me, the door's jammed." I looked at her, trying to open the door with everything she had. I rolled my eyes and said, "It's handprint activated." I grabbed the bags of our belongings. I walked to the front door and wiped away the build of moss, vines, and dust off the keypad near the door. I saw Claire's eyes grow wide as she looked at the keypad. I chuckled and said, "Go ahead, put your hand there." She got jittery and excited as she placed her hand on the pad and it lit up and scanned her hand. A few seconds passed and a load lock sounded as the door squeaked open, showing it was made of heavy, thick metal. She then said, "Wow!" She was about to run in when I held out my arm to stop her. I then said, "Give it a second." The sounds of lights turning on and breakers flipping echoed throughout the cabin as every one of the lights came to life to show a long-forgotten home that only needs a little cleanup for it to be good. I removed my hand and let Claire run through the cabin, looking at everything. Suddenly, light shined through the cabin as Lauren was putting up pictures of us throughout the house. I wiped my forehead because of the sweat buildup from moving heavy furniture in the cabin. Lauren gave me a friendly smile and said, "Aw, it's so cute. Oh my God, girl." She rolled her eyes and said, "How about I make us a jug of tea as my storeman looks so tired?" I came back to the dust-covered living room to see Claire look at all the pictures of me and Lauren hanging on the wall. I closed the door, making sure it was locked behind me before I walked to her, putting my arm on her shoulder with a bag in hand and said, "You look just like her, but act like me. Best of both worlds, huh?" Claire smiled and said, "Do you miss her?" I nodded and said, "Of course, every day. I know that one day we will all be together again. Till then, we have to show her that we are living our lives to the fullest." Claire nodded and grabbed the trash bag with her stuff in it and went upstairs. I followed right behind her as she looked through the halls and opened the first door to the right. It was my and Lauren's room. She looked around before going to the second door and opening it. Inside was Lauren painting the walls pink as she said, "You do not have a spouse to see it yet," and threw a paintbrush at me. I chuckled after grabbing it and said, "You need to have this door open and let some air in. I can't have my wife and baby getting high while I'm working hard." Claire snapped me back to reality as she said, "Pink? It's a bit too girly, but I kinda like it." I nodded and said, "I tried to tell Lauren to get you black and red walls with a race car bed." She shook her head and said, "Nah, I would take a dragon bed with hanging daggers and the walls are on fire." I rolled my eyes and said, "Well, for now, this is what you have. The last door is a bathroom. I'll go light the boiler in the basement." She was too busy dusting everything off to be hearing me, so I went to the kitchen and looked through the drawers for a lighter. Till Lauren said, "Looking for this?" I turned around to see the lighter in her hand. I smiled and said, "Thank you. Hopefully I can light the boiler so we can have hot water. I bet that sounds nice." She nodded and said, "Maybe a hot bubble bath to some music playing." "Oh, stop teasing me. Of course I want hot water." I found the lighter in the drawer I opened. After grabbing the lighter, I went to the basement door, opening it and looking down at the empty basement below. It gave me chills, as if I was looking in the sewers with my flashlight. I walked down the extremely creaky stairs, but got scared as something yanked at my shirt. I turned, ready to fistfight anything behind me, and noticed there was nothing but a nail that got my shirt stuck on it. As it jutted out of the wall, I sighed in relief and embarrassment. I pulled my shirt from the nail and went to the floor of the basement and looked around in the dark for a string or something to light up the basement. I pulled on an old white string, and the basement was filled with MRE and other necessities, with the boiler in the back tucked away. I went over to it, crouching down, and turned the gas as I prayed it would work, and sure enough, it lit first try. I turned the gas to max and stood up before hearing my ex say, "I see you ran away from the city, abandoning the case." I turned around and reached for my pistol tucked away, but it was missing. I looked at the person before me, and sure enough, it was my ex, holding my gun in her hand, and said, "We need to talk. I didn't need you to aim your gun at me." I began to say, How did you... She cut me off and said, "I took it when you got caught on the nail, but I need you to listen. That hunter group or whatever is bad news. What you think you know about them is wrong in many ways. They don't..." She stopped to the sound of a loud bang and the scream of my daughter. I didn't hesitate a second as I dashed up the stairs to the living room, where the side of my head was met with the butt of a rifle. I fell to the ground with a loud thud. I looked around to see other hunters standing around me with guns drawn, loud begging from upstairs till a smash of the door could be heard and my daughter screaming again. I tried to get up and go to her aid, but found 3 steel-toe boots in my back and stomach. I stood in awe as to the sudden change in plan. I grabbed the hunter's hidden knife, stabbing him. As I flipped him around, several bullets plumbed his back. I grabbed the gun that was strapped around his neck and opened fire on the other hunters, killing 2. I fell to the ground and rolled away, but didn't realize that I was next to a steep drop-off. I tumbled down a hill as I wrapped my arms around my head as I hit trees, branches, rocks, and the ground till coming to a sudden stop on the paved road. I tumbled down the hill as I wrapped my arms around my head as I hit trees, branches, rocks, and the ground till coming to a sudden stop on the paved road. My body was broken. I couldn't move and felt the blood leave my body. This was how I died, rolling down a hill and landing on the road like some old cartoon. As I lay there, I could hear a car coming to a screaming halt and people gathered around to look at my mangled corpse. Being bathed in the blinding light of headlights, the figures around me faintly faded away. That's when I woke up in this room. There was no door, no windows, just a white room with a bed made of everything white. The computer is on the white desk next to the bed sits. It was on. I wasted time looking around trying to get out of this place. Something always pulled at me, making me want to go to the computer. I gave in and sat in a white chair in front of the old computer and read, "Tell me your story and I may send you back to complete your unfinished life." So here I am, writing out my story that leads up to my death. It is not anything special, but I do hope I will find those motherfuckers that killed my daughter and slaughter them and all the rest of them. I don't know where this story will go, but if you are reading this, well, I'm dead and I'm talking to you somehow from a white room. I guess I'll just wait now.
And that's the ending of this short story. If you enjoyed, make sure to smash the like button. If you want to see more content just like this, then make sure to comment below. If you want notifications and to help me out, then make sure to subscribe. And another thing, thanks goes to I Am on Duck, as his amazing narration made this all possible. Without further ado, I shall see you in the next video. Bye-bye.